everyone, and welcome to the Hope Report, your light in the darkness, brought to you by the Lindell Recovery Network. I am Jason Perry.
And I'm Melissa Hooray. Jason, it's my birthday month. It's November 1st, so we're going to celebrate all month long here on the Hope Report. That's what I'm leading with today.
Nice. Well, happy birthday month.
Thank you. Yes, it was a
And
it's a good day. I'm happy. Actually, I'm excited that all the Halloween. My neighbor can now take down their monstrosity of a Halloween setup that I have to look at every day.
so is this a big birthday or a close to big birthday?
As I'm going to be catching up to you here. Close to a big birthday. Yeah. Not quite I'm going to be holding on to that last year in the decade.
We officially become old next year, you and I.
I can't believe it. There's no way we could be that old. I mean, I saw my husband Mike go through it and I'm like, you don't look like you're that age. How can this be happening? So,
Yeah. I lose about 10 years when I shave, but I'm kind of claiming my age. So,
Yeah.
because I don't have gray anywhere else. It's just in my beard. So,
Same with Mike.
kind of like, you know what? I'm gonna own it. I'm gonna own it. I'm an old dude.
Well,
You
you're
know,
not. I'm proud of what the Lord has brought me through. I keep thinking when I was in my addiction, I didn't think I'd make it to 30. I just
yeah,
kept feeling so much dread about my future. And now I'm excited that he's let me live this long. I mean, every day I'm just happy for another day.
yeah. I didn't want to live this long. When I was in the SEAL teams, I wanted to die in my early 30s. In a war in a distant land. With
Oh
my
gosh.
bros back to back. That's all what we all wanted.
Right.
On some secret mission. With in a big pile of brass. That's what we all wanted to go out as. But I'm just so
Wow.
thankful because life has only gotten better for me from
I
that point
know.
on. You know what I'm saying?
Ah,
It's funny when you're counseling younger people, and no matter where we are in our life, we think like, oh my God, this is forever. It's the worst. It can't. My life is ruined, and you're like, you have no idea how much greatness is waiting for you. Like we all, with outside of the Lord, we all settle for so little, and
you're so
God is
right.
so good.
I know, and I've only known you for 6 months, but you continue to inspire me with what's
Well,
happening in
thank
your
you.
life and you're growing your ministry. And I actually had a couple friends reach out to me this weekend and one was last night, but I mean, you've made an impression on me in a lot of ways. This friend had called me and I was busy, manning the door and stuff. And I saw her phone call and I thought, oh, I'll call her back later. And then I'm like, I'm holding it. So I answered the call and I talked to her and she lost her husband a little over a year ago and also just lost another person. But I connected her with Heath, who we had on the podcast, and
Right.
they've just been kind of talking and processing grief together and texting. So I was able to
I'm
do
proud
that.
of you
Yeah.
for accepting the appointment that God set for you.
I am too. And I told Mike, I said, I can't, when somebody calls me, I'm not going to regret, not answering. And I know sometimes we just can't, maybe something we're
Well,
unable to.
there are times when we can when we know it's not life crisis stuff, right? But when it's
Yeah.
like once you step out of the shadows and you declare yourself a Christian, people are going to start trusting you with stuff and they're going to come to you with their problems. And that's what you're for,
Yes.
right? To point them to the answer, which is upstairs, right? So,
Right.
if we're serving him, we have to take those calls, even when they're inconvenient. And sometimes I'll screen them. I'll be like, all right, what are we talking about
Is
here?
it
All right, this isn't
Yeah.
a God thing. All right,
Yeah.
I'm going back to my family. Well, we can talk
Yeah.
next week.
You're
But
right.
when it is a God thing, it's drop everything because that's what I said I wanted. I wanted to serve him and I put no boundaries on it.
You're right. And I knew that because she was calling me, usually we'll just text or, communicate that way. I knew it was something. And she said, I've been watching the Hope Report. She said, I actually got into bed and I was getting ready to go to bed and I watched some episodes and she's just talking about how she loves it. It helps her, it gives her hope, which is our goal, that there is something beyond this world, that there is something to cling to. And so we're starting to have those conversations around the Lord and getting her plugged in.
Well, that's great. But again, I'm so proud of you and of your husband. He came here to our forging weekend, crushed it, and by all appearances, he has been continuing to walk that out. And again, I'm just proud of him because he really went all in on it.
Well, thank you. And please continue to pray for him. Like we talked about being under attack and to trust in God. I mean, just really to trust the Lord with when he's worrying about how things are going to work out with his current situation at work. And he has an opportunity coming up on Wednesday. And we don't know if it's the thing, but we're praying for wisdom and discernment. And, if it's an open door, that God will make it clear to us
Well,
that it is.
just pray for peace that, when the solution's there, that he'll have peace with it.
Yeah.
That's all you can do is to take this anxiety and this thrashing and everything going on. And when the right thing comes there, let it be peace and make it clear. And then,
Amen.
and it's time to
Yeah.
jump, right? It's
That's
time to
right.
jump. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and we had a conversation about taking a leap of faith because I was saying, and I was really powered up on this on Saturday morning. I'm like, Jesus, we're with Jesus on parallel tracks, and like we talked about, sometimes we have to make the move. He's laying the groundwork. He's like, here you go, I've got it. Here it is for you. I got a lifeline for you. Are you going to take it? It's not always going to be, I feel this or that. I watched Ken.
Oh yeah.
Ken Gray's feelings rant. That was
It's
so
the best.
awesome. I had to show Mike too.
What's arugula? Well, I feel like you either like it or you don't.
That was the best. I loved it. I just laughed so hard. And then
that's one of his, he's got 4 or 5, legendary, sermons that he's done. That one, the prodigal son, his Adam and Eve one is absolutely mind blowing. He's got a totally different take on Adam and Eve.
Oh wow.
His take is that every pastor says that Adam just threw Eve under the bus, right?
No.
That he was
He's
like, oh
sorry,
yeah,
the woman gave it to me. Yeah.
So, but Ken, I think, nails it and gets down to it and and says basically he chooses Eve over God, and that's why we're out of there. Right? He basically,
that's pretty good.
basically declares that he's choosing the woman over God, and that is the end of everything. Right?
Yeah, that was the
but
demise.
I mean, but that's exactly what happened. When he does it, it's with such emotion, and it's whatever, and instead of painting, it does paint Adam still as kind of this villain for doing it, but it's not the easy. Oh, he just throws Eve under the bus.
Yeah,
it's like the woman you gave me, she did eat the fruit, and I did too. I chose to go with her in this death, right? And that's what he did. And it's just more. It's a more beautiful thing. It's more complex. And I just found it so refreshing. And his prodigal will make you bawl your eyes out. His prodigal sermon. He does it every year when he gets to it, and it crushes you. He's pouring his eyes, he's bawling his eyes out on stage. It's just so powerful.
Oh yeah, I'll look that up. That's an interesting angle. I would definitely want to see that. Hey, Michelle. Michelle said we need to, the closer we get in our spiritual walk, the more we're attacked. Yes, and we should be better equipped to handle it, hopefully. I bet to handle those attacks. So Ed Bailey. Ed's back
I was about
today.
to say, let's get Ed on here.
Yeah, so we had Ed, and I had kind of messed up his job and everything he was doing. He worked for a treatment program called No Longer Bound for a long time, and he really laid some amazing groundwork there. And he had the story of he wrote a letter to his predecessor. When he started the job, he wanted to leave the place.
I remember that was really, really touching how he did that.
Yeah, I loved that. And he came out of meth addiction, was really just beaten down by addiction, and now he has moved out of No Longer Bound, and he's doing intervention work. So that's what we learned at the end of our last podcast with him, is that he's basically going around just traveling around with his wife and his kids, and helping people through the intervention process. So we're going to learn more about that today. This is a huge topic for all of us, I think.
Such a needed ministry.
Yeah.
Really, when you have 93,000 people a year dying to addiction, which I can't even imagine what it's going to be this year. It's just so needed. All of us who have lost loved ones, I lost my brother, I lost my aunt, I lost countless other family members and friends to drug addiction. It's just to have an intervention and have it be successful. And I mean, it's a rescue mission.
It is. And I feel like it's such tough work. You have to be, I think, uniquely called. And we should all be in the business of helping rescue people. But to do this intervention work, I think, you have to have a specific anointing for that. So I want to hear about this from Edward.
All right.
Is he
Well, Edward,
ready?
if you're ready to come on, give me a thumbs up. All right. Open floor. Welcome back, Edward Bailey. Welcome, brother.
Hey,
What's going
Edward.
on? Good to see you.
You too.
You
Where are
too.
you today? Are you in Las Vegas? Where are you?
We're in Tucson, Arizona for the time being.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So we were just kind of recapping your last visit with us. It was so interesting hearing about your journey and how you decided. Maybe you could sort of refresh us there. How you were at No Longer Bound for several years. I don't know, 10 years, 10 plus years, somewhere in there, I think. And
17.
oh,
Wow.
17. Okay. Wow.
Holy
Yeah.
smokes. So,
It's a long time. So how did you come to that decision? I want to take step into something else. What opened up that opportunity?
Yeah, like you guys mentioned, I had written a letter to who was going to end up being my successor and said, as a servant leader, which was my philosophy, that leadership is about gaining influence and leveraging it for the good of others, not for yourself. And so I was always going to be the lid, the capacity on whatever I was leading. And so the organization was never going to magically outgrow me. And so if I wanted the organization to grow, I was going to have to either grow out of the way so it could grow up to me, or get out of the way so it could grow past me. And so there had been many times of evolving and recreating myself as a leader to grow out of the way so it could grow up to me. And then the end of this last year, the end of 2020, we were sitting there making 3 years plans, and I was sitting there for the first time going, man, it's not me. Like, I'm not supposed to be the one that's going to take it. And so that was always my hope, that God would just let me know when the time was going to be. And if not, just send someone to put me down like old Yeller, And
right.
so,
Yeah.
fortunately, I got to do that myself. And so, so I came to him and said, the organization needs a different kind of leader. I'm more of an entrepreneurial type leader. And so it needs someone to execute, it needs a different personality type to lead. And so that's not me. And plus the timing was perfect. I mean, God runs everything in parallel typically. And so the best thing for No Longer Bound, the organization I was leading, was also the best thing for me and my family. And so my daughters are, they are 7 and 5 now. And so, I wanted to be
So
with them
fun.
full time. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
man, they were my dream. And so the opportunity opened up to sell everything, move into an RV, travel the country full time, figure out a new way to help people, and then let No Longer Bound prosper past me.
Well, I
Wow.
want to I want to compliment you and your wife for having the courage to do that. Well, a lot of
Yeah.
us talk about that. We kick the tires on the RV dream and the traveling and all that stuff, and then we get bogged down in the details, and it doesn't really happen. So you guys are actually giving it a legitimate go, and what an awesome adventure! I think.
I agree. I agree. Jay and I talked about that after, because he and Lauren had discussed that for a while, and just many of us think that would be our ultimate. So you've been doing it a few months now?
4 months. We became location independent on Independence Day, July 4th.
Oh, wow.
That's great.
Oh, location independent. So talk about how it's been going since July 4th. What is your day-to-day life like, and what is life like for you living out of the RV?
Oh, that's just, I mean, every day is different. We were hiking through the desert yesterday, in the early part of the day. By evening, we were doing some celebration with the kids and eating way too much candy in Tucson, and we're just finding places down to do that. But their normal day can be, you're getting up, you're doing homeschool with them. We're working out in the gym every morning that we'll find, or they brought equipment with us. And so then we'll work for a few hours in the mornings, spend time with family all day, do adventures throughout the day. And so it's, you just change all the time. I mean, last week was a, a atypical week, but we had the RV parked in Palm Springs, got on a flight myself, went to Kentucky to consult with the treatment center there, flew back to Palm Springs, loaded up the RV, drove it 6 hours to Tucson. Next day I get up and fly to Georgia to do an intervention, fly
Wow.
back to Tucson to be with the family. And so now we'll be here in Tucson and hanging out until Saturday, and then we'll go up to around Sedona, see Grand Canyon, do all that kind of stuff. So it's just,
Man.
man, we've got a few things to invest in life, and time is the greatest resource. And so I
Yep.
wanted to invest it into what I thought was going to matter. My job at No Longer Bound was to raise money. That was my primary responsibility when it came to the leadership and how I spend my time. And so I'd spend my time with people that had a lot of money and had a lot of character, because if you're wanting to give money away, then and you've got extra money to give away, these were millionaires. And I would always ask them, I've always been a learner of life and trying to learn from other people's mistakes. And so, I'd say, what would you say to your 40-year-old self? And every single time it was about spending more time with family every time.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so the American dream says you stack up a bunch of money and you do that stuff later, but then that just doesn't work.
No.
Came to
so
find
good.
out that the American dream is just a bit of a lie. It's just it's a marketing strategy, and it doesn't work well in reality. And so I just didn't want to end up missing what was really my dream when I was 24, which was to have this family. And so just investing as heavily as I can into experiences with them, because I think that's something looking
awesome.
back, I'll have plenty of regrets, but I'm hoping that won't be one of them.
Investing in experiences. That's good.
Yeah.
None of us on our deathbed are going to be like, wow, I really wish I worked more hours.
No.
It's going to be, I wish I spent time with this person, that person. I wish I went here. I wish I smelled this. I wish I saw this. I wish I did that. So I think that's great. I think you got a really solid grasp on that. And I completely agree with you that time is where your heart is, right? Which is why, why I also say, if you're not spending a good amount of time in this, where's your heart, right? So,
Yeah.
and my daughter right now is 2.5, and I have another one on the way due December 25th and 24th, sorry. And I can't wait till they're 5 and 7 and we can go around the country. I can't wait to where they're old enough to remember, old enough to process, and be able to do that. So I admire you so much for what you're doing, just in the family realm and the excitement of your life. Now you take that and that you're serving the Lord by doing these interventions, which that can be a pretty dynamic, crazy thing, I can imagine. Let's talk about that.
I just want to say quick, Edward, that I feel I just texted my husband. I said, "Hey, are you watching podcast?" He's downstairs working in his office, but I mean, he's been just beaten down by his job for the past several years, and it's really become really terrible. And so, but you're so right, because our daughters are 11 and 13. I mean, they're a little older, but and one of them is out of the house, but they're on the cusp of that time where he constantly says to me, oh my gosh, I mean, they're growing up so fast. I don't want to miss this. And so he's just at war within himself, where he needs to make a change with his work. But anyway, so I love that message of, you can never get time back, and you're creating memories and experiences with them. That's the most valuable thing you can ever do. So anyway, yes, Jay, let's get into the intervention. I was wondering, how do people find you? Do they, you said you were flying to Kentucky and going different places. Do you also just go to the streets and find people, or how does it work?
Yeah, people find me typically through either referral, but if someone wanted to find me, you can go to farronrecovery.com, FARYN, farronrecovery.com, which Farron is just a mashup of my daughter's Fallon and Farrah's names.
I wondered about that. Yeah.
So that was probably a bad choice, since as I get older, I can barely remember what their names are anyway. So I created a company that's a combination of their names. So that's probably a bad choice, but family's just everything to us. And so that's why I do the interventions anyway and work in this, because it's, if we can rescue a life, that's great. But really, if you can reconcile a family, you've affected generations.
Amen.
Addiction sends ripples through generations, and trauma sends ripples through generations. It is just hard to measure. And so does recovery, hope, healing, freedom. And so if you can affect a family system and reconcile a family, you've done some stuff. I remember standing at a graduation at No Longer Bound and looking at a young man whose life we had been saved, his young 4-year-old son with red hair, and his father. And so there was 3 generations standing there, and thinking, I'm supposed to be sitting there talking about this graduation. I'm about to cry my eyes out, because I'm looking at that little 4-year-old boy going, if his dad would have died in his addiction, statistically, that boy's life it's slim pickings on his likelihood of having a decent life when you've lost a parent. And then I'm looking at the dad, who's the grandfather and the father of the guy that had been through our program, going, God heals hearts and everything, but man, you lose a kid and you're just never the same again. And so this was not just 3 lives that have been changed, but generations to come. And so, yeah, I think that's what the passion behind the work is. I went to do an intervention this last weekend in Georgia, and it was a young parent whose son is homeless with him. And it's just, I mean, the passion that you have for that is going, my God, I want to see this guy's life saved, but you also want to give this kid a dad back, or not even back, a dad for the first time. And so yeah, that's why I do what I do, and the way that people get connected is typically it'll be through referral or find me online. But it's a thing. And so Melissa, you asked if I go on the streets. No, that's not how I. It's not how I do it. It's more of a little bit more structured than that. It's a great thing, but that's a little bit more of a rescue mission type approach. Mine is going to be coming through referrals of someone that's a family member or loved ones that are asking for an intervention.
Sure. No, that's excuse me, that's great. I mean, I think we've all seen the show Intervention, the A&E show. That I think it's been pretty successful. It started back in 2005, but there was an interventionalist on there, Jeff Van Vonderen, and he's actually from up in my area. He lives in Hayward, Wisconsin, like a few hours north of here. But I think a lot of people maybe got introduced to the intervention process by watching that show.
Right.
Could you walk us, how close to reality is that? Could you kind of walk us through the process of when you meet with someone, how the process goes of doing an intervention?
Yeah, it's pretty close to reality. I mean, you're dealing with someone that's in crisis, that's not yet ready to ask for help. And so I was speaking to someone in the treatment industry this morning, actually on the Zoom call, and they were talking about how much has changed, how the chemicals have changed and the treatment of them hasn't changed. And so, it's heroin, in the 60s was really bad. Now everything's got fentanyl in it. Well, fentanyl is about 100 times stronger than morphine, and you've got carfentanil, which is an elephant tranquilizer that's also getting mixed in your heroin. And so if you would have asked me 5, 7, 8 years ago what I thought about interventions, candidly, I probably would have been like, yeah, you gotta be ready. You gotta be ready. These people aren't ready. You can't convince someone that they're at the bottom. They got to find their own bottom. They got to be ready. And that was really the philosophy of the treatment industry. And I shared that for sure. Well, that's just changed in the last many years. People don't get a chance to get ready. They don't get a chance to hit bottom. They don't get a chance to if you give them room, they're going to wake up, come out of denial, admit they need help. They just don't get that chance anymore. You don't have the luxury of just going and getting high anymore. You just die. And the overdose deaths have just gone through the roof in the last few years. So you had this epidemic of prescription pills, and then we fixed that, which caused an opioid issue. There's a really, really good movie, if you want to watch it, or show called Dope Sick, that'll show you kind of what happened with Big Pharma. And then we cleaned up Big Pharma. And so then you created this heroin crisis on the back end of that. And then we started mixing in fentanyl. And so now fentanyl's in everything. It's in uppers and it's in downers and it's laced in marijuana. It's in everything else. And so my point being, you just don't get the chance to go and hit bottom like you would have years ago. And so an intervention is much more relative these days than it ever has been. So just super important stuff. And so to answer your question, really, really long way, is it's pretty close to reality. I mean, you're dealing with someone that is in denial, that doesn't realize how much they need help. And you're doing everything you can to, as a family unit, shake them, get their attention, wake them up, and help them, put a mirror in front of them to say, this is how bad it is right now. And then you hope that they respond to it positive.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Melissa.
So what is your measure of success for an intervention? So we often see, we see different health experts, I think, are kind of split on the effectiveness of interventions. And maybe when we're watching on TV, we see, 75 or 80% maybe take the help that's offered and go to treatment. And then, often we'll see follow-ups where they didn't finish or they didn't leave. How do you measure success with the intervention? Is it just engaging them? Is it, how could you say some more about that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, your number one goal for an intervention is to get them to go to treatment, period. That's it. You keep everybody focused on that one goal, no matter what it takes. And so you're thinking about, if you take it out of the addiction world, you think about someone that's bleeding out And they're like, I'm not bleeding out. You're like, you're bleeding out. Like your arteries are cut. Like you're going to die really soon. All like we could talk about everything else later, but right now you got to go to the hospital or you're going to die. And so it's pretty much that laser focused during an intervention. It's all about just getting them to go to treatment. So that's goal number one. And then if that happens in the immediate, that's great. Then everybody gets to be excited about that. Then there's a whole, there's a whole ladder down set of goals. You want them to actually get well. And again, they get to control all of that. Unfortunately, they control if they're going to go. Once they do go, they can control if they're going to, they're just getting sober or are they really getting free? Are they looking at addiction as a symptom and what was really beneath it driving the surface, or are they just trying to get their family off their back? And so it's a process. The first step in that process is to get them to go to treatment. Now, if that doesn't happen immediately, you've also got some other goals. One, the intervention isn't just 2 hours. It's as long, the intervention can last 6 months. The thing that ends the intervention is the person either goes to treatment or the family doesn't hold their boundaries that they said they were going to hold. Now, if the family keeps holding boundaries, it can go as long as that family is willing to keep those boundaries because you're continuing to help them stay uncomfortable and so they can stay in that process of intervening. Now, once that family gives in to them and says, they get a cave on their boundaries, basically, then that's when the intervention is really over. And so, yes, your whole goal is you trying as hard as you can to get them to go to treatment. All you're doing is you're just giving them a shot. I mean, you're just doing everything you can to give them a shot.
Yeah, so the boundaries are basically enabling the kids to continue to do drugs, correct? Is that what you're talking about when you're talking about boundaries? Letting them stay there, letting them do whatever, anything that makes it trying to be compassionate, but it's not. They need tough love right now, which is what an intervention is, which is probably what one aspect of that. So, saying basically you can't stay here unless you do that, and you say the second you let them back in, you can't lose your leverage.
Yeah, You're just you're allowing them. You're because of the way that it makes you feel. It makes you feel better to help them not hurt, and that's just it doesn't make you a bad person. It makes you a loved one. Everything that's wired inside of our DNA as parents or spouses or siblings or any role that you've got in their life. Everything wants to nurture them for help them not be in pain and to it's completely opposite to your nature and everything inside of you to allow them to even be in pain. And so you're denying yourself, thinking about servant leadership, you're denying yourself, you're choosing to feel awful about it so that you can give them that chance. And you're helping a family understand that it feels like you're doing something for them, but it ends up being the more selfless thing to do is to allow yourself to go through the pain and the discomfort of holding those boundaries in place.
Yeah, you're fighting for your loved one. You're literally fighting for your loved one
against yourself.
Yep. And that's a really good point. Where do we go from here?
Well, I'm wondering, Edward, your last episode where you were with us, you talked a lot about your Christian faith, your upbringing, how the Lord, the role of Jesus in your life. How do you work this into the intervention process, or how does that look with someone who maybe is not a believer, or they have no interest? Are there certain things you do or approaches you take?
Yeah, I mean, first you're just looking at it like you're a person that has faith and you're also in crisis support for them. And so, the same way, think about if you're driving an ambulance, you've got to get them to stay alive. so they've got a shot at having a healthy relationship with anyone, including their spiritual relationship. And so one, you're doing that. But I mean, the other one is, went and did the intervention last weekend. The guy said, no, totally sucks. But he texted me about 2 days ago and he said, man, I'm glad I met you. Sorry, it was under awful circumstances. I'd like to be like you one day. You seem spiritually fit. And I was like, boom, win. Dude hadn't gone to treatment yet, but something in that moment of him not feeling judged or looked down upon, he felt like I was not, he wasn't more shut off to spirituality from that experience. And so I think if anything, what I try to do is the same thing that people had, that they did well with me, which was to meet them where they are and really don't have any judgment on them. Try to be empathetic and understand what they're going through instead of, you're going to shut them down really quick if you tell them what they should do, should be acting like, should be believing, and so,
Yeah.
you know, help them understand, that you lean in towards the mess with them and understand, like, I get that you're struggling with all those things and faith being included. So yeah, man, you just hope to help to let them say, if they walk away, if they're going, something was different about that, that's a pretty good win. If it creates curiosity for them to learn, to look for something that there might be something else out there that's worth staying alive for.
Yeah, I would say probably 80 to 90% of the people who come to LindellRecoveryNetwork.org or who reach out to us through the Hope Report, it's usually a family member or someone who is saying, my person is ruining their life. They're going to die. I'm so fearful. And they're putting a ton of effort and energy and work into doing all this stuff for their person. And we used to have a saying we'd say as counselors, I won't work harder than you. Are you working harder than the client? That was always a thing that would come up. How much are we doing in order to help get them to get on board? So do you have any thoughts for people who maybe they're trying to help, maybe they're not ready for an intervention, but someone in their life, spouse, kid, wayward kid, what can we do to help people, but yet get them to initiate and engage in the process?
So, I mean, the easiest answer is you have them work on their own health. The family member, we end up having as the person in crisis, the squeaky wheel gets the most attention, or whatever that saying goes. And so, we end up focusing so much on them that our own personal health goes to the wayside. And so you end up having a family addicted to the person that's addicted to drugs, and so one, you push them towards their own personal health. And then two is, I just advise families different than I used to. There is no more overreacting. Used to, it's like, they're just a kid, or they're going to figure it out. You gave them more rope to learn some lessons and let life's natural consequences be a teacher. And so that's just not the case anymore. It is a different landscape altogether. Mm-hmm. And so there is no more overreacting. If it's a kid, I don't care about their privacy. If it's a spouse, if it's a family member, anything you can do that's in your power, I say do it these days, because there's more funerals than ever now.
Yeah. Like I led the segment saying 93,000 dead last year, which is up 30%. And this year it's going to be even more. And it doesn't even scratch the news cycle, right? It's not even mentioned. Right. The urgency that you're putting out there is something that I think people need to understand. As parents, we reflect back to the drugs of our day, or the things like even today's pod is nowhere near. It's like 20 times stronger than like the strongest stuff of the 70s or even the 80s, right? Now people get fentanyl and they don't even know they're getting fentanyl.
That's right.
Right? Like I used to ask crack addicts, I'm like, what in the world were you thinking when you smoked crack? Like crack, when it first came on the scene and people didn't know that it was so addictive, right? They were just like, oh, it's just another type of high. But we saw zombie land, like the zombie apocalypse of crack, right? And all that going on. And people were like, there's a reason why I never tried it. I didn't want to take that risk. My brother who died to heroin, I'm like, he started on the oxys, right? Couldn't afford the oxys after he robbed everyone blind, and everything else went on. And then he went into heroin, and heroin eventually claimed him. And, I always asked, and I remember asking Travis Carey, who I did an interview with, and I'm like, Travis, what made you stick a needle in your arm? Like, nobody ever has that picture of their life in the future. You know what I'm saying? We all, when we're kids, no one's like, I want to aspire to that. Some of the other stuff I was a little bit more understanding of. You smoke something, you do this, but now fentanyl is getting in everything, and people don't wake up, like you said. It is so easy to OD on that stuff. It's mind-boggling. People on their first try, people who are surprising their friends with it, and they think they're just giving them a better time, and they're not waking up. It's crazy.
Yep.
It's just so dangerous. Now there's a new date rape that's coming out. It's making its way through England. I do a lot of self-defense training. I do a lot of preparation stuff, a lot of security stuff. And now there's like an epidemic going on in Britain right now, where people are injecting women with drugs with these really small needles, and they're not even feeling it. And then in 30 minutes, they're out and they're off with, they wake up the next morning completely, and it's like, yeah, it's happened to me 3 times, 2 times. Like the news media is interviewing these people. And it's like, I mean, that's coming over here. It always starts somewhere else. And then the predators pick up on that trend and it comes here. And so now it's not even them opening a bottle anymore and watching people put stuff in your drink. Now they come up, they pat you on the back, and it doesn't take much. And now you're gone. And and I got to come up with tactics to protect people from this, right? Which is always the same buddy system, Life 360 app on your phone. If you start feeling an altered, level of conscience and you start feeling fuzzy, you need to hit your alert on your phone and say, I'm here, come get me, right? That's the only way I can teach someone to protect that, other than saying, I'm not going home with someone tonight, no matter what, stay with me. But again, it's just such a hard thing growing up right now because of these one mistakes and you're done.
Oh man,
it's true.
That's
it's a different world.
Very scary. Very scary. That's good advice, though. I mean, we used to, I guess, like you said, give people some time to find themselves and all of that, and it's just not anymore. If your eyes are open, you see what has happened in the world. But Lauren has a good question about weed here. Is the pot that you can buy at these legal distributors that strong as well? Kind of like the K2, is that, or more of the stuff that you would find through other dealers?
Yeah, it's really strong. Yeah.
I've worked with people that have been on the synthetic stuff, and that is just a horrific thing. I mean, what happens to their body, and going to the ER and heart issues and all the stuff. I mean, yeah. So the synthetics are just another horrific nightmare from the pit of hell.
Well, it's just a lot stronger. I mean, everything is, if you're buying it legally, it's just more medical grade. I mean, it's just like everybody else. You compare it to what you knew growing up, and what we knew was you either got brown stuff with sticks and stems and seeds, or you got hydro, which was great and green. So now it's just a different planet now. I mean, everything is so strong.
Yeah. To put it in alcohol sense, it would be like having one beer and blacking out and waking up 3 days later. Like that's, that's the level of it, or one sip of a beer and having that happen, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's how potent it is. So I want to give you a chance, brother, to talk about your Freedom for Good course.
Yep. Oh man, thanks.
Yep.
Yeah. I was basically going, all right, so Left No Longer Bound, this has been a dream for many years, but because I was so busy building the organization, just didn't have the time. And so I remember like it was yesterday, my mom coming to visit me in the program and saying, I wish I could come here to this program. And I thought she was crazy at the time, but I get now what she was talking about. She was saying, I wish that I could put all of life on hold and come and work on just myself for a year. And it's so true. And I was sitting there going, I mean, for 17 years, I'm watching these people's lives get changed like I just can't explain. And I'm sitting there I'm spending time with everyone outside of treatment because I'm, more amazing role. And I'm looking at all of these people that would be benefiting from what these guys in the program are going through. Any professional, any person in ministry, anyone, these guys are digging into what was driving their behavior. And addiction is just, here's my one-liner, addiction is just an exaggerated case of the human condition. Addiction is just an exaggerated case of the human condition. They're like all of us. We have emotional needs of love, acceptance, worth, and security. We call them our laws: love, acceptance, worth, and security. And someone in addiction just found a chemical to help meet those emotional needs. Many of us find that in other ways, whether it's through eating, workaholism, bad relationships. Addiction is like all of us. And so these guys are getting their lives changed because they had the gift of hitting bottom. But many of us have responsibilities and don't have time and don't have that luxury of putting everything on hold. And honestly, the luxury of losing everything. We've got real responsibilities. And so we don't get to find out what was driving our behavior. And so I ended up saying, if I could take 17 years of experience and put it into one online course that would help anyone, what would it be? And it would end up being this Freedom for Good. And so the whole premise behind it is that our core beliefs hold us back from everything that we've wanted in life. that I think that the premise is that our beliefs drive our behaviors, and we're in reaction and in response to beliefs that we've never learned how to identify. And so it teaches us how to go and identify what the core belief is on the inside that was formed at an early age that's driving the behavior that's so frustrating and confusing and damaging to our lives today. And so if you can, if you're looking at an apple tree and you try to take down that apple tree, you pick off all the apples and you step back and go, see, no more fruit. But then, of course, it reproduces that same fruit, because if you want to take that tree down, you have to go to the root of it and cut it at the root. And so it teaches us how to do that, how to identify, change what those core beliefs are. And then it unlocks our career, our confidence, our relationships. And so this was 17 years of life transformation for people in recovery, and saying, let's put it together for someone that, everybody else that's out there. Melissa, like you mentioned with your husband, we go through a crisis. It shakes us on the inside. We don't know what to do with all of that. Or someone in retirement going, now I don't have all this work to do, and I'm stuck with my thoughts in my head, and I find myself wanting to get busy again because I don't know how to deal with those things. And so just trying to create that same opportunity for everyone to have that same life transformation that people are having in recovery.
Sounds great.
Yeah, so I don't know if you can see, but I've been putting up your website. I put up
Yep.
and now we're looking at your process. You want to talk a little bit about your process?
It's just a process for intervention. And so, basically from that first call to when that intervention would take place, and we've got a more detailed, once we engage a client, more detailed so they understand where they are in the process. I just found that if you help someone understand where they are in a crisis or in a process during a crisis, it just helps provide some clarity and some peace. If we all know we're going through something and where we are in that journey to something, it helps. And so, starting with the first call, first contact, and then walking the family through how to do that intervention, but really making that first step is the most important thing.
So you'll basically travel anywhere to meet with people. Is that right?
Either I will, or I'll work with one of my interventionists on my team across the country.
Okay.
So I'll oversee the process if I don't do it directly. And so I spend hours every week, spend hours this morning engaging and finding out treatment providers all across the country. I'm looking for who's the good ones, who values people over profit.
Yeah.
And so it either be myself or one of those people that I've built a relationship with and trust.
Are there things that you do to help yourself just maintain balance, self-care, the things that, doing this very intense work that can be so exhausting and draining? I mean, I imagine you get to set your schedule. I mean, you can choose the number that you're going to do and all that, but are there other things you do to maintain balance?
Yeah. I mean, the biggest thing is, one of my favorite things is the journal. And so I wake up every single morning at 5 a.m. and it's me and a journal and doing that quiet time. I've been doing that for 17 years. And I think it's one of the most powerful principles I took out of my own recovery journey. And so I built that into that Freedom for Good course to show people how to have a two-way conversation with God, how to create margin in their day and level up their life by having quiet time. And so that ends up being my foundation for my day. And you stack a bunch of days together and you get a future. And so that's been the most powerful thing that I do. Other thing is leaning really heavily on my on the close relationships in my life for my blind spots, because if I'm unhealthy, I'll be the last one to know it. you know. And so it's trusting other people around me when they say, "How are you doing?" I'll say, "I don't know. How am I doing? Why do you ask?" You see something I don't. But so I have built-in accountability, transparency, and relationships. Go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, my question for you was this. So it's going to be really hard. I call these your war council, right? Where you build people around you that are willing to fight for you, to hold you accountable, right? They have to be someone that you love and they love you so much that they're willing to fight you for you.
Yep.
Right. Like that is, and when you're so mobile and you're bouncing around the country like you are, you're not like in where I can say, where I have people that I can count on that come over my house every week, or we fellowship every Wednesday night, and then we go to this and that to do that. Because you're so mobile and you have this freedom, how are you maintaining that connection with these people that can watch your back for you?
Yeah, so like right now in Tucson, we're parked next to another family, husband, wife, two little girls, known them since second grade. And so you meet up with families that are like-minded, shared values on the road together. You're also unplugged from the matrix of society a bit too. And so your group gets smaller. And so, right now it's really heavy with my wife, and then also virtually virtual provides a lot. So, we were doing a small group virtually and things like that too. And so you just adapt and adjust to figure out we're doing life in a different way. So how do we get the same things that we need in a different way?
Yeah, yeah. I just know it's so key with the men that I and the women that I work with is to have people around that are accountable, that are spending time with you in a real way, investing in each other is what I call it.
Yep.
And to where everything from as, hey, get a cute waitress and who's a married guy is having a hard time and he's sitting there maybe watching parts of her body a little bit too much. You're like, dude, what are you doing? Get a wife and kids at home, knock it off.
Right.
Or the guy or whatever. You can just take that and throw it down a bunch of different roads and just it's kind of, sometimes when you're virtual, it's easy to put on the face. Whereas, in those other more common times when you're not on guard, you let the mask slip sometimes. So, I mean,
Right.
good on you that you're finding people on the road.
Yeah,
Yeah, for
definitely.
sure.
So Michelle said your work must be very rewarding, and I was wondering how, how has it impacted you, I guess, doing this work compared to the work you were doing before?
Yeah, I think the most rewarding part is it's just, yeah, it's totally rewarding. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, speaking today with someone in the treatment industry, and the guy off the phone was like, "That was such a good call." I was calling him to make a referral connection. It's just the business side of what you do. What we ended up really talking about was he's got an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old kids, and he's just, he's like, "I don't think this is a coincidence that we're talking. I think I'm missing spending time with my kids, and
Mm.
I'm working too much." And so, man, I'm like, boom, here's my cell phone. Let's really talk. Like, to get the
Wow.
bullcrap out of the way about the work stuff. So we're talking about helping people, and that's the business side of the referral thing, which gets to be rewarded because you're helping somebody. But what we really talk about is like, even in any, like, especially in ministry or in any line of work where you're helping people, those people can get burned out the most.
Yeah.
I mean, the most, because you've got this additional layer of responsibility that you're dealing with someone's life, soul, family, etc. And then you can also get this additional layer of guilt of like, I should be sacrificing myself on the altar of, good work.
Oh
And so I
yeah.
think that was the biggest thing. Was, to me, the most fulfilling thing is I love the work that I do, but I also, it's a vision, but also my biggest thing was I don't want to sacrifice my children on the altar of my success. And so
Wow.
to me, the most fulfilling thing is what I'm doing outside of the work. And then I do love doing work that matters for people who matter. So I love working at the intersection of a calling and a career. That's something I couldn't imagine working a quote unquote normal, regular corporate job. Just personally, once you've done it, you get pretty spoiled by it.
That's for sure. I'm writing that down so I can get it screen printed on a shirt. I don't want to sacrifice my children on the altar of my success. I mean, that is so good.
And that's what 90% of entrepreneurs do, right? I mean, any of us who've been an entrepreneur, myself included, you have to work 100-hour work weeks like they're going out of style. That
Yeah.
initial launch from nothing to something takes so much work. I mean, the reason why Trident and Shield, my security and consulting company, was Lauren and myself and a couple other people, and we were beating out Fortune 500 companies on contracts because they would stop working on Friday, and Lauren and I would work all the way through the weekend and lap them, right?
Mhm.
Because we would just never stop. And we were able to do that because we were together, working together, and we could steal moments. But once the kids happened, everything grinded to a halt because you have new priorities, and I just couldn't do it at that level anymore. And that's why I know so many millionaires who don't even know their kids, or their kids, they have no relationship with their kids whatsoever. And
Yep.
I'm like, was it worth it, bro? Was it worth it? And they all say no in the end.
Yep. Every one of
So,
them.
yep. He nailed it earlier. And I was just like, I'm glad you brought that up. Particularly with this Instagram, social media society, these Gary V's and all these go, 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 work a zillion hours a week, all this other stuff. And
Yeah.
you're sacrificing everything around you for it. Right. And you nailed it with that quote. So I couldn't agree with you more, brother.
Absolutely.
And here's one thing. I find myself to these people who, like yourself, I did 16 years in the military. I walked away with nothing. If I'd done 20, I would have had a pension, and a bunch of benefits, but it was never about the money for me. It was always about the cause. I'm a cause guy. I'm a
Mm.
crusader.
Yeah.
That's my thing. I left that because my brother died to heroin while I was overseas. And I'm like, I'm going to fight the war on drugs at home. Because when I went to his funeral, no one was there because they were already all dead. Right. And this was before fentanyl. So, you know, I talk to guys now who are miserable where they're at. You know, I won't get into the politics side, but they basically live in a place where no one feels like them. If they put a certain sticker on their car will get keyed and people give them the finger. They're absolutely miserable in their jobs. And I'm like, your sanity is not worth the money you're going to get for hanging around for a couple of years. Like, you got to go and put your family's happiness first over whatever, like downsize your home, get a cheaper car. Like, those things don't matter, man. Like, they don't matter. Like, we can always downsize and have a simpler life where you're more available to disciple your children and your family and give back to people, because you're not reaching for that next mountain and the next mountain, the next mountain. Like, when I was doing that, I never could enjoy the moment because, all right, I got here. That's where I want to go next. And now I got to try to get the bigger house, the bigger car, better, more status, right? And it just kills you.
Had a good dude say it to me as a one-liner about a week and a half ago. He goes, "Live simply, so you can simply live."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome, man.
That
Awesome.
is good.
So where do
What's
we want to go from
next?
here?
Yeah. What's next, Edward? Is there anything else you want? We've got, 10 minutes or so left, but certainly don't have to fill all that time. But where can so people find you through your website? I think we kind of covered that. If they're looking for an intervention with a loved one. I also wondered, and I did ask you this, but I'm thinking more about people because we just encounter this so much. If you have any do's or don'ts for people that are trying to help their loved one get to that, kind of working through the stages of change with them, trying to help move them toward change.
Oh, he dropped out.
Oh, I was just getting into it there. I don't remember what I just said. No. Whoops.
It was great.
Yeah,
It's all good.
It was so good. No, Jay, how many people we have that reach out to us and say,
Yeah.
My daughter is killing herself. My husband won't quit, and they're just run ragged. And I know you did this with your brother too. I mean, you tried so much to help, all the different lengths you went to.
I actually tried to adopt my brother at one point, to get him out of the environment. I flew him out to San Diego. He was out there with me, and I said, "Welcome back, by the way, brother." And
Yes.
and was exposing him to great things. I took him swimming with sea lions, where he could actually like get nose to nose with baby sea lions and all this. And he was telling me it was great. And then he'd get on the phone, he'd call my mom, and he'd cry to her at night saying he was homesick and wanted to come home. And I would call my mom, like, for the love of God, just don't answer the phone. Right? This
Yeah.
is that whole thing, fighting yourself. Right? The fighting yourself. Just don't answer the phone and let him get comfortable here, and he'll adapt, and it'll be great. But didn't happen. So, Melissa was just was in the middle of asking you a really good question, and then your signal dropped. Do you want to repeat it?
Yeah, I was just looking for some more guidance for people who they go to the LindellRecoverynetwork.org. They're looking for help for their loved one. And usually, I mean, the people I hear from 90% of the time are the people who are trying to help someone else. It's not the addict themselves, really. And so I'm wondering what we can do with those people in our lives. I had a friend last night call me about, she was just devastated over somebody who ended their life tragically, and she had tried to help this person, and they fell into meth and cocaine, and there was a long backstory with it, but is struggling with that guilt and feeling of what could I have done? What more could I have done? So I know that's a long question, but ways to help somebody, motivate them, mobilize them for change, and then also maybe to the person who's trying to get somebody help, but they're not really responding.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There's kind of break it apart in two pieces. You do everything you can with healthy boundaries. And so doing everything you can is you reach out to them. If you can, if an intervention is something that you can do, then you try to do that. If you're codepending them anyway, meaning if you're paying for anything, if you're relationally codepending them, then you do anything you can, anything that's inside of your control to help bring their bottom up. anything. We're not, meaning to help them. You bring their bottom up, helps them realize the gravity of their situation. It allows them the opportunity to feel the consequences of their actions. If they cannot feel the consequences of their action, then the pain of staying the same isn't bad enough to go through the pain of the change. So if they have any control over the ability to help them feel those consequences, then go for it. And then they've got to do that with healthy boundaries. And so they've got to keep themselves healthy in the meantime, because if they're everything they're doing is foregoing their own health, their own family, their own spouse, their own kids, because everything is about this person in their life that is unwell, including their own health, and they've got no boundaries set, then there's a reason that when you're in an airplane and they say the masks are going to drop down, put yours on before you take care of your own kid, because if you are not healthy, you cannot take care of your loved one. So the same thing goes for leadership as it does recovery. The best thing you do as a leader is to show up healthy, because then you can give your best self, you can innovate, you can be empathetic, you're not frazzled and a hot mess. Well, the same thing goes for someone that's in crisis. The best thing you can do is bring them your healthiest self. And so you've got to have some boundaries in your life as well, so that you still got to understand, I'm going to do everything I can. And then at a certain point, they've still got to make their choice. And so I'm going to keep myself healthy, work on myself, go see my own therapist, do my own quiet time, my own reflection time, get better as healthy as I can myself. And then that's kind of what my suggestions would be, for sure.
I think you just nailed it there with when you said, we have to let people experience their consequences, because so often our helping or enabling is preventing them from really getting, like you said, uncomfortable enough to need to make that change.
That's right.
So yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks.
Yep.
Well, we're at that time. Do you want to pray us out, Melissa? And we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, Edward, thanks for coming back on. It was awesome seeing you again. And it's so exciting what you're doing. And I think you're inspiring, especially not only with the intervention piece, but just telling people, hey, you need to set priorities in your life. Right? Is it going to be about work and about reaching the next milestone, or you really made that change? And yeah, it's inspiring. I think this podcast is going to touch a lot of people. So thanks again.
Awesome.
So I'll just pray it out, and we'll wrap up. Lord Jesus, we just invite you now. And I thank you, Lord, for Edward, for his testimony. Jesus, I just ask for protection and provision over him and his wife and their children, Lord. Thank you for this new season that you have called him into and this difficult work that he has entered into. Lord, I pray that you would just bring him the people who need to meet with him, the people that he is uniquely equipped to help. I pray that you would remove barriers for people getting the help that they need, and that you would just place divine appointments in Edward's path, like with the gentleman he was talking about today who was struggling with work issues. I pray that those people would just come effortlessly into his path. Lord, I pray for all of his team across the country that you have uniquely equipped to do interventions. I just pray that you would give them peace, give them just rest. I pray that you would help bring balance into their lives, and that they would be able to prioritize things so that they do not get burnt out in the process. And Lord, we just pray for anyone struggling with addiction today, that you would come near them, that you would draw them to yourself, and you would help open their eyes to the destructive nature of their behavior, that they would become convicted by their sin and by their addictions and struggles. Lord, I pray they would get uncomfortable enough to make the decision to do something different, to be able to reach out for help, to become willing to take that step and go into treatment or whatever they need to do. So Lord, I just plead the blood of Jesus over Edward, his family. I pray that their travels would be safe, that you would help them meet godly people in all the places that they settle, and that you would just meet their needs in every way. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Thanks for coming, brother. We really appreciated you having you back. I'm glad we got to talk about what you actually do this time.
Yeah, it was good.
And I hope that, your course seems great. And I really hope that we can, send some people your way.
You got it. Thanks, guys. Have a good
All right.
one.
Thank you. You too.
All right, everyone. That's it for us today. We will see you tonight on PCM. and see you on Wednesday, same time at 1 p.m. Bye.
God bless.